Our next stop in the Vento Nature Sanctuary tour brings us to the long concrete railroad maintenance pads, where John Anfinson, Chief of Resource Management with the Mississippi National River and Recreation Area, a unit of the National Park Service, explains the area's rail and transportation history.
This sign interprets the railroad history of the Vento Nature Sanctuary, and as you can see behind me, there's these long concrete, they look like sidewalks, but they're really part of an unwheeling yard for the trains that used to be lined up all along here, and then maintenance would be done on them. This was a massive railroad yard by the 1880s and 1890s and into the early 20th century. In fact, from the 1870s to the early 1920s, St. Paul really becomes much more of a railroad town than a steamboat town. It begins as a steamboat city. Initially, steamboats start coming up the Mississippi in 1823 with the Virginia, the first steamboat to come up the river. And by the 1850s, steamboat traffic starts to really pick up. By 1857, steamboats come and go 1,000 times from St. Paul, bringing all kinds of immigrants, primarily German, but other immigrants as well from the East Coast. Railroads really don't come in until after the Civil War here. Downriver at Rock Island, the first railroad reaches the Mississippi in 1854. It's the first railroad to cross it in 1856. But at that point, railroad expansion across the Mississippi and along it stops, due in part to an economic panic in 1857, and then the Civil War from 1861 to 65 interrupts further railroad expansion. As railroads began expanding up and along the Mississippi, St. Paul and St. Anthony, which is the city at St. Anthony Falls, joined the rush to railroad. In 1862, the first railroad run occurs here in St. Paul and goes from St. Paul to St. Anthony Falls, where Minneapolis is today. But after the Civil War, railroads began crossing the Mississippi. By 1880, there's over 13 railroads that have crossed the river. And they also start running railroad lines up the Mississippi River because it's flat, it's an even, easy grade. And so railroads start connecting cities along the Mississippi, and the steamboat traffic begins to wane. By the late 19th century, steamboat traffic is essentially done on the Mississippi River. And it's going to take major navigation improvements in the early 20th century to bring traffic back on the Mississippi. So railroads really come to dominate the Twin Cities area. And St. Paul becomes known as a railroad town from the late 19th century into the 1920s. If you look at historic photographs of this place over time, you can see the steady growth of this particular site as a railroad yard. Well, why this spot? Why does this spot become such an important place for railroads? It's the same reason that Father Lewis Hennepin discovered in 1680. It's that geology that defines this place. There's a break in the bluffs here with a nice, low, gradual valley, the Phelan Brook Valley, leading us right through the bluffs and gradually up into the land behind us. So railroads follow that same ancient Dakota path, that early path they took Father Lewis Hennepin on, out of the valley. So it's been a transportation corridor for hundreds and hundreds of years.